If you are looking to make it in real estate, this is a conversation you don't want to miss. Today, we sit down with the author of the book, Making It in Real Estate, John McNellis. And John has over 40 years of real estate experience, particularly in commercial real estate, where he breaks down his early deals, his partnerships, his failures, and things and lessons he's learned along the way. If you want to learn from a pro who's been doing this for a long time and has done over 100 commercial real estate development deals, check out this conversation right here on Multifamily Insights. John McNellis is a veteran real estate developer and founding partner of McNellis Partners, where he spent more than 4 decades developing over 100 properties across Northern California, primarily supermarket anchored shopping centers. Let's welcome to the show, John McNellis.
Thank you, John. We've got two Johns here. Delighted to be with you.
Yeah, absolutely. John, listen, you got a great background, and I know you've done a lot more than even what I was able to allude to in your bio. Can you take 1 minute and give us a little bit more context on your background?
Sure. Uh, Grew up here in Northern California, essentially. I was a journalism major in college, which I love being a journalism major, but I decided one of the smartest things I ever did, John, was I decided senior year of college, I don't want to be a journalist. Prescient. Went to law school. I thought, I'll be the next Matlock or Perry Mason and free innocent people. Got a job with a fancy law firm out of law school. Practiced litigation for no more than a year before I just hated it. Absolutely hated it. I thought it was soul killing. It was just paper wars. Uh, Basically, you're training to become a full-time professional jerk as a lawyer. Shifted over. It was a good firm, and they had a real estate department. So I shifted over to being a real estate business lawyer, and that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed helping people buy, sell, finance, lease, hotels, industrial buildings, shopping centers, whatever. And then 3 or 4 years into that, I hooked up with a much older client. He was about 15 years older. I was in my kind of mid-20s, late 20s. He was a shopping center developer. And then we started working together, built our first shopping center in 1983, so 43 years ago, and been at it ever since.
We have a lot of people who get into real estate from the legal field. What was either an advantage or even maybe a disadvantage coming from the law background?
That's an interesting question. Uh, so just to fill in a little more of the details. So when I'm 24, I'm fresh out of law school. I sort of always had the real estate bug, and I was always pretty good at making money. So I bought a duplex when I was 24 years old. I think I spent 25,000 on it, and I probably put down 1,500 bucks. Cobbled together the financing. Got lucky with that. Uh, Sold it a year later for 60,000. Traded it into a fourplex. Uh, Sold that a year later for 120,000, and so my $1,500 became 90,000 in about 2 years. And spoiler alert, I've never done so well ever since for a return on money. So this is a way to answer your questions. I would have been stuck doing those little deals, the fixer uppers, the mom and pop kind of deals, except the law, because I was doing much larger deals for clients. I was getting familiar with large, $10 million, $20 million numbers. And I learned how to put together LLCs, limited partnerships, did the financing, and I also made invaluable contacts with people with money. So the practice of law allowed me to kind of skip, let's compare it, you've got a basketball there. It allowed me to go from, let's say, a D League to the NBA much quicker because I could take the nuts and bolts experience I had doing the little deals and then apply the legal knowledge I had of the big ones and then skip a couple steps. That helped quite a lot. And to kind of a larger view, there are a number of lawyers who go into development. Some succeed really well, but I think many don't. Sometimes they are too hidebound. They're too concerned about all of the risk. That's what lawyers are famous for, identifying risk. And some, on the other hand, think they're bulletproof. They're lawyers. I'm not going to worry about that risk. And sure enough, that comes back to bite them.
A really good insight. I appreciate you sharing that because, the legal background is helpful, but it's really your familiarity with those larger transactions, right? In doing development deals and understanding what it takes to make something happen. That's great. And it's really a great insight for everyone, right? If you can learn how to do large deals while getting a paycheck and not necessarily risking your capital, that's a
That's it.
great way to learn and become an investor yourself, right? Versus, a lot of people have no experience, no background, very new to the space. They put up all their money and it's a wish and pray mentality. And yes, that's great to be entrepreneurial, but I think there's a lot more of a balanced approach if you can learn from other folks who are in the space, get those feet wet, get a couple deals under your belt, then transition into doing your own deals. You mentioned for you, it was that partner who was doing the supermarkets and the shopping centers. Tell me about that first deal you did together. Like, how did that conversation come about to even partner? What is it that they saw in you? What is it that you saw in them? And just tell us how that worked out.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So I've been doing these little side deals, and then first with my own little money, and then I was among friends and family. I was raising money, so I was getting pretty good at selling. This older developer, he was a client of the firm, and I was his lawyer. So the first couple of shopping centers that we built together were for his company. He was the principal, I was the lawyer. Uh, and while he worked for this company, it was easy for him to put together deals because the company put up all the money. This fellow uh, was an accomplished developer. Uh, I know little now, but then I knew absolutely nothing about construction, about how a shopping center should be laid out, whether parking should be 60 degrees, 90 degrees, how wide the row should be, how tall the building should be. So he had all of that knowledge, but he was not gifted as a salesman, whereas I could. But at that age, I'm 26 maybe, I could never sell myself, John, as a developer. People would laugh at me if I said, "Hey, I need to raise $10 million to do this deal." But what I could sell was Bob. I said, "Here's this guy, Bob. He's 40 years old. He's a Harvard MBA, accomplished developer. Here are all the centers that he's built." So Bob's company went out of business, and they said, "Oh, here's a site in Healdsburg, California," which for your listeners, most of you probably know, is a very shishy town now in Sonoma County. It's in the wine country, a very pretty little town. So this center was on the books, but everything was up in the air. And so I said to Bob, "Hey, let's be partners." And he said, "No, kid, you're just an annoying lawyer." He said, "I'm going to do this deal myself." And so he went out, tried to raise the money himself, failed. And then I said, "Let me do it. I'll be your partner. I'll raise all the money, and then I'll do the legal work. You build the shopping center." Uh, so at that time, it worked out really well. So we sort of needed each other. I I didn't have his experience, and he didn't have my ability to sell. And so that's how the partnership kicked off, and it lasted 5 or 6 years until we no longer needed each other.
Yeah, I think that's a great story, John. I mean, first of all, you added value because you had the salesman's, background. You already had the legal background. You had the relationship from working together. He may have thought you were annoying, but obviously you did a good job as his attorney for him to ultimately
Yeah.
agree to work with you, right? So building that familiarity helps tremendously. And sometimes it does take patience for that other person to recognize, you know what, I actually do need this person, or I need someone who at least brings a skill set. And a lot of times investors can be, maybe too full of themselves and think that they can do it all by themselves, maybe a little too cocky, a little too confident. And they realize, hey, all of us have strengths and weaknesses. The things that some people do really, really well, maybe it's analyzing deals or maybe it's talking to investors or brokers, but maybe you don't have that other side. Maybe it's the operational side or something else. That's where partnerships can really thrive. And I love the fact that, you mentioned you guys partnered together for about 5 or 6 years until you didn't need each other. Because I think oftentimes people think about partnerships where it's a lifelong commitment. And that's great if you can find that. You can build a business and you guys do, all these deals for the next 50 years. Great. But I think more realistically, what we tend to see is, hey, you know what? This is maybe a temporary or a shorter midterm partnership. Let's work together. But yeah, at a certain point, we're going to kind of drift apart because you're going to have different goals. You're going to be at a different life stage. Maybe one of you moves and doesn't want to do as many deals. Like that just starts to happen. So you don't have to enter into these partnerships like it is a lifetime marriage. You can just have a lot of the conversations up front. How do we dissolve our partnership if one of us wants to go a different way? Like, have those conversations in advance so when that time arises, it doesn't get ugly. How did things kind of transition for you and your partner?
All right. So to the flip side of that coin, this goes back to we basically started working together in '82. By '84, in '83 rather, we hired a couple of employees, and Beth Walter and Mike Powers, they are still with me today, 43 years later. When we broke up, and it's been a great working partnership. You made a point which I think is worth underscoring, John. Unless you want to stick with flipping houses, which you can do on your own, without partners. But if you want to move up from rookie ball to double A, triple A, you want to do larger, more complicated deals, you need not necessarily financial partners, but we can come back to that. But you need operating partners. You need. I'm still, here's a secret. I still know nothing about construction, despite having built, 80 odd buildings and rehabbed others. So, I've got a partner who handles the construction, who handles the property management, who handles all the another one handles all the financial accounting. You know, y- you've got, as a developer, I think a good way to think of it is that you're a conductor in an orchestra, and you've got other people. In order to make music, you need other people to work with. Uh, they don't need to be employees. So I've had these two principal partners, but then everybody else was in the orchestra: the title company, the outside lawyer, the consultants, the contractors. You need, as a developer, to kind of work with them all, to produce the symphony, the new building. And I'm all in favor of partnerships. That first one with Bob didn't really work out, but we shook hands and went our separate ways.
Yeah, listen, I think that's great to hear too, because, you hear a lot of stories of people who get into a partnership and it doesn't work out and they get burned and, oh, I'm never going to partner again. And that also, a lot of times, is basically a resignation that you're going to stay small and maybe you're not going to hit some of the goals and dreams that you had because you're not going to have the team or these resources to be able to do those larger deals. And that trade-off is not one that I think people intend to make, but maybe they retreat to maybe something more familiar and just doing things themselves as opposed to exploring that partnership. So I appreciate you sharing that. And someone needs to hear that and understand that, hey, sometimes you meet people, it doesn't work out, but you meet other people, and maybe there are folks who align with
Yeah.
your vision. And you don't have to be the jack of all trades and know everything either, right? In this space, we're talking about commercial real estate, you're talking about development. It's really about being able to be a project manager and an orchestrator and really make sure all the pieces are moving together to make those projects happen. I want to ask you, man, you've done about, like I said, over 80 or so developments. Which one is your favorite? And I know that's like ask which one's your favorite kid, but all right, just
Yeah.
out of all of them that you have, which is the one that stands out? Which is the one you would lead with as far as, hey, you know what? Make sure everyone knows I developed this one.
You're right. It is like comparing kids, but the sentimental favorite is back to that very first shopping center that we built when I didn't know what I was doing. John, it's been open 43 years. We still own it today.
Oh wow.
We paid off the mortgage. The town has done nothing but get prettier and fancier. It's an excellent property. Hell, we've renovated it now a couple of times. That is my sentimental favorite. And the investors, to do that deal, I had to raise $1 million of equity, and I raised it at $25,000 a pop, which, if you think about that's a lot of conversations.
Yep.
But those investors today, they make about 25,000 a year, maybe a little bit more on their original investment. So they're thrilled, and I wish somehow I'd been able to buy them all out, 20 years ago. But yeah, that's probably my sentimental favorite.
John, that's an interesting point. So you raised $1 million. Again, this is 40 years ago. But you raised $1 million, 25,000 a pop. Now so you're paying off about 25K, a year now. So great investment. Sounds like these are long-term investors who stayed with you this entire time, who have not looked to liquidate and get their money back. Was that always the plan when you structured the deal, or did you initially think that, hey, we'll get this thing stabilized, we'll sell it, and give everybody their money back?
Yeah, no, I don't think we had a brilliant plan at the time. This was, uh, I never, I take that back. We did plan to own it for the long term. We said this is a great town, high barriers to entry. The drawbridge is up. Uh, and back to those 100 deals we've done, we've sold 70, 75 of them over the years, sold or traded. And the best properties, we've kept, and that this is one of them. But at the time, I wasn't planning when I was 26 or what I'd be doing 40 years
Right,
later.
right, right.
So, uh, but those, but we quickly moved away. This is a different topic, but not that long after that, we stopped using financial partners. I said, I don't want to have limited partners, and I don't want to have big fancy financial partners. They just add a layer of complexity and illiquidity to an already illiquid asset. So those investors, they were not professional investors. They were lawyers, like partners in my law firm. Friends, family, and they were. Wouldn't you'd be thrilled, right? You put up 25,000 40 years ago, and you're getting that much every year. No, I can't get those guys out with a crowbar. So,
No, it makes sense. I mean, listen, yeah, I mean, you're making 100% return on your investment annually. Like, why?
yeah.
Of course, why would you? Why would you want your money back on that? And I imagine the equity has gone up tremendously. So yeah, it makes sense. You mentioned something that I think is important, and you talked about, early on before you did this deal with Bob, you had started raising money from family and friends. You did this deal and raised capital, but then you made the decision to say, hey, you know what? I no longer want to raise capital for these deals. Can you just go a little bit deeper as far as why you kind of made that decision, and maybe give some insight to how you've shifted your philosophy when it comes to capital, raising capital, and the responsibility that comes alongside of it?
Okay, this is a complicated topic, and this is probably where I'm going to jump in with a pitch for my book, which for those of you who are watching this is called "Making It in Real Estate: Thriving as a Developer." Uh, I've devoted several chapters to this very issue, and we can talk more about it later. But so, if you put your thumb and forefinger together, John, that's what I started with, 0.
Yep.
So, the $1,500, I guess. So the way this works, pretty much the only way it works, you start with family and friends money, right? You can find a deal, you need to raise $1 million to buy a $5 million deal today. So you raise that $1 million. And if it goes poorly, okay, you're out of the game, and your friends still like you, but they think you're a loser. If it goes well, maybe you can do another deal with them, and maybe a third. But unless you're a Rockefeller or Elon Musk, you're going to run out of friends with money. So they're kind of like a booster rocket. They get you to a certain level, and then you have to jettison them. And then the next step, once you leave the friends and family, you go to the much more hostile, tougher environment of institutional investors, the pension funds, the big money managers. They charge a lot more for their money, and they have absolute total control. So back to us in the early '80s, we used family and friends money, but we were successful. We graduated to the financial partners throughout the '80s, and that was kind of a boom time. President Reagan at the time had deregulated the savings and loan industry. Uh, in those early days, all a savings and loan could do was make a first mortgage on a single family residence, a very solid, very safe, slow business. Reagan deregulated it, and suddenly they were just throwing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars at commercial real estate. So we had 3 or 4 different financial partners in the '80s, and none of them really worked out all that well. There was a Great Recession. for my nickel just as great as the Great Recession in the early 90s. And we found out a lot of unpleasant things about our financial partners. So here's a pro tip. If you think you're in a good shape with a financial partner because they can't go after you personally, it's non-recourse. Well, if you think about it, and I'm sure it's in the document, you can't go after them if they decide to pull out on you. And that's exactly what happened to us on a couple deals where we put the deal together, we bought it, we did all the work, and then when it was time to execute, because of external financial pressures, the financial partner said, "Sorry, guys, we're out. You can have it." They walked away from their investment at absolutely the worst time in this recession. So suffering from that, I come to the decision, and it's not exactly Saul on the road to Tarsus, but the epiphany is I'd much rather own 100% of a little deal, 100% of $1 million deal, a McDonald's or a gas station or a fourplex, than to own 10% of a $10 million deal or worse, 1% of a $100 million deal. Because then if you have a financial partner, you have no control. They can sell at a time when it's absolutely a terrible time to sell because they have financial needs, or they can refuse to sell when you say, "Come on, guys, the market is hot. It's never going to get any better." And they say, "No, no, no. We've already made too much money this year," or, "We don't want to take this gain." So I went from 0 partners to family and friends to institutions. And then about a little more than 30 years ago, saying with my 2 partners, Beth and Mike, we're going to do little deals and we're going to use our own money solely. We're not going to have outside partners. And that's one reason, John, why we sold. We we had the money to buy one. And there's an old joke. It says, "We buy junk and sell antiques." so so but we were buying junk, junky shopping centers, fixing them up, and then selling them as antiques. And that was our capital for the next deal, and so on.
I love it, man. That's really good insight, and I think it's very helpful just to think about it full circle on investing because for many of our listeners, they may have started listening or started investing over the last last cycle, maybe the last couple of years, maybe the last even 10 years, but we don't think about how things have shifted over the last 40. If you go back to the 80s and you go back to maybe some of the policies that were put in place that allowed capital to flow more freely, it I think there's certainly an allure of raising capital and attracting capital and working with family offices and all of this. But it's really important to understand that there's 2 sides to that. And, a lot of times we're looking at it from our risk when it comes to how do we do this deal. But there's also the risk of this partner can pull out and, they don't maybe have the same commitment that you have on this deal. So making that decision to say, you know what, we're just going to buy our own properties, fix and flip them, or just hold the best ones for our portfolio. That's the business model that you've come to. But I think the thing that really is cool to me is that you've gone through and you've tried different things. You figured out what you liked about this and you've made adjustments on your path.
That's
What
right.
most people do is they will listen to this and say, "Oh, this is why I shouldn't have partners," or "This is why I shouldn't raise capital." But they're missing that actually is what puts you into position to make these decisions and come to this realization, right? Like you have to have enough success to be able to say, "Okay, well, here's the part that I like. I don't like that part." But you can't just do that if you don't have any money. If you're sitting there, you don't have money, you need a partner, period. Like you
Yes,
don't get the luxury of cherry picking to say, "No, I'm going to do this way." You've got to, and a partner could be a hard money lender. It could be whatever. That term is loose, but you're going to need some help to start generating more capital so you can kind of build the portfolio that you want. So figure out what that appropriate next step is. John, you held up your book there earlier, making it in real estate.
right.
That is available anywhere people want to go. I know you also write and you do some contributions on a monthly basis. Talk to us about where we could find some of your readings.
Sure. I write for the San Francisco Business Times, and also the Registry Magazine, which is a West Coast commercial real estate magazine. Pretty much write a column once a month. I've had a couple come out this month. If your listeners or viewers want to find it, that they can befriend me or whatever it's called on LinkedIn. I repost all those essays. And you're right, the book can be bought Amazon, all the usual places, uh, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and so on. And, in the book, I sort of, my central thrust in the book, kind of back to something earlier you said, is that my opening chapters are keep your day job, guys. Real estate is tough. And here's the public service announcement that anyone who says that they've done, anyone who's done, say, more than 10 deals and swears he hasn't lost money is lying. It's not, it's beyond belief. Yeah. Now, there are some people who say, well, we've always bought, never sold, and so we haven't lost any money. But actually, they have, because values rise and fall. So what annoys me is so many podcasts and articles and TV shows saying how easy it is to make money in real estate. It's not. Uh, According to Chat, I checked this. At least 60% of development firms fail within their first 10 years. And my guess is it's higher than that, because a lot of development firms, when they start to fail, they shift over to property management, shift over to consulting, or just doing fee work. So because of that high failure rate, I think it's a good idea if you can keep your day job and then do real estate on the side. And that's how I started. I was doing it on the side for like almost the first 10 years, while I was practicing law. In fact, it was 10 years. I kept the job, because the other thing about development, which should be obvious, is it takes 3, 4, 5, 6 years from the time you first see a property before it starts to cash flow. So how are you going to eat? And if you start like I did with nothing, it's hard to get fees out of a deal at the very beginning when there's no certainty of profit in the deal. So one of my suggestions is do it on the side until you're at a point where you can move up to the next level.
I love it. And John, if you guys want to reach John McNellis, you can email him. His email is john@mcnellis.com. That's McNellis. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, though. Right now, we are going to transition and go to our round of insights. When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7 questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to the show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. John, give us a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Well, again, back to the book. This is the 3rd edition of the book. Oh, and by the way, the book is considered, the commercial real estate's Bible. It is taught at Stanford, Berkeley, Georgetown, Vanderbilt, Clemson. It goes on and on. It's become a textbook. But this last edition, which we just came up with, John, I just published a few months ago, I included a whole fat section on my worst mistakes. I jokingly, here are 10 great ways to lose money in real estate. And I'll just quickly touch on one. With that same partner, Bob, we went from that first very successful deal, then we jumped up to a whole nother level. We bought a shopping center in Sacramento that needed to be renovated. And I know we're running short of time, but I'll just say we overpaid for it. We over-leveraged it. And by over-leveraged, I mean we really over-leveraged it. The savings alone gave us 103% of the purchase price. Wow. So we had no money in the deal. We actually pocketed a few $100,000. And then we tried to overdevelop it. And at the end of the day, 10 years later, from start to finish, we lost the thing in foreclosure. And very painful. But back to your earlier point, we paid a lot of tuition on that deal, but we learned a lot. I learned about not over leveraging. I learned about being really careful about the purchase price, and which I think is the biggest mistake most people make. They overpay on day one because, particularly the young guys who are, I've got to get this deal, I need to get this deal, and there's competition, and they pay too much. And so maybe the deal works out where they make a tiny bit of money, or maybe they left all the development profit in the seller's pockets. So there's a couple lessons. Don't overpay, don't over leverage, don't overdevelop. I've got more, but
John, give us a digital or mobile resource you would recommend for our listeners.
A digital or mobile resource. For me, my favorite digital resource is Google Earth. If you call me, John, and say, hey, here's a great site in this town, it's perfect for a supermarket, then I can Google Earth it right down to that intersection, and I can say, hey, you're right. Or I can say, no, the intersection doesn't, you're on the wrong side of the street. You're on the wrong corner. It's very useful in retail. Google Earth, I recommend it.
All right, besides your own, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
A book other than my own book that I'd recommend, I would recommend, this is for writing. It isn't so much for real estate, but we all write so much now. It's all text. I would write The Elements of Style. It's a very thin book, and it's about how to write clearly, and I think it's Strunk and White, The Elements of Style. I would read that in front of my book, because if you can write, that was one thing journalism did for me, John, and one reason I've always loved to write. In journalism, you learn to write simple declarative sentences, subject, verb, predicate. You learn not to use the passive tense. You learn to keep it simple, and most people are terrible at that.
Give us a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Get out of bed before 7 a.m. and get to the office.
It's a good one. All right. Give me your number one insight for making it in real estate.
Persistence is one. Risk evaluation is two. You can't really make real money without taking real risk. The trick in the business is if you take too much risk, you go broke. If you don't take any risk, you're a consultant and you're not going to make any money. So the real, and some guys have this talent and some don't, but you've got to evaluate the risk in a deal. Like, will I really be able to lease it up? Will I really be able to build it for this much? Will I be able to sell it for this much? And what about these little issues like, there's a small toxic problem, or maybe there's asbestos, or maybe I have to work out a deal with the adjoining property owner. You've got to look at all those risks, evaluate them, and say, yes, I can get past those risks. I'll accept those risks. That is tricky, and it takes time to learn it. And again, beginners tend to take too much risk because they have to, and if they get lucky, they don't get too badly burned by taking risks.
All right, John, last question here. Give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Favorite place to grab a bite to eat. I'm not much of a foodie, John. So, I care more about the company and the ambience. And as long as the food is okay, I'm fine with it. I guess there's a restaurant here. I'm based in Palo Alto, California. There's a restaurant here in town called Evvia, Evvia, which is a locally famous Greek restaurant that a good friend owns. I guess you'd say that's my favorite place.
All right, there it is. Well, John, lots of great information, man. I really appreciate you sharing a little about your journey, talking about getting started back in the early 80s and understanding what it took to scale that portfolio, building that relationship with your business partner, being able to grow and scale, to adjust, to change partners, but to continue to realize, There are better ways of doing this. Instead of taking this LP capital, why don't we just do it with our own money moving forward? And just really that growth and the lessons learned along your journey that can help so many of our listeners. Again, if you want to learn more, reach out to John. He's got some great content available on LinkedIn. You can also email John at McNellis.com. John, thanks again for being a great guest and coming to Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, John. My pleasure. I truly enjoyed our time together.